everyone. Welcome back to Who Are You and What Are You Doing Here? So happy you're here. Do I not say that every single time? Today we have Emily Wilson on the podcast. I'm realizing I've now had two Sarahs and two Emilys on the podcast. Emily is a mother, an artist, a friend. She has an incredible Etsy shop, which you should definitely check out and buy something off of. I'll link to it in the show notes. Really good conversation. I always say this too, but it's true. We talk a lot about our journey from when we first met through to today. We touch on religion quite a bit, deconstruction, touch on capitalism. And if you have any sort of experience with like deconstructing any kind of religious belief or just belief that you like really held firmly and then have let go of or changed, I think you will really like this episode. I'm not sure if I need a disclaimer here. I guess like you could say we talk about religious trauma. So if that feels triggering or like something that you don't have space for or want to listen to, then would encourage you to skip this one. I'll try to put timestamps related to what we talk about, but we do kind of weave in and out. I also do just want to say a little, so I guess I shared the content warning or trigger warning. I'm also aware that I have listeners, friends, family that deeply identify with Christianity and the Christian faith, and I just want to say I support everyone doing what's best for them and appreciate the same in return. I don't mean to knock people's individual faith or beliefs, but I do want to speak about my own experience and own what's mine to own, no matter where you fall on the Christian or not Christian spectrum. I hope you get something meaningful out of this conversation and appreciate you being here. Oh my gosh, here we are.
That
beautiful. Perfect.
Excellent.
Oh my goodness.
Am I too dark?
No, I don't think so. No, I love your setup. Is Jimmy going to be your audience member?
He's trying to distract me right now with his bod.
With his bod? Ooh, this is going to be a fun episode. You just see Jimmy in the background. I actually just started a Patreon, so we could do Patreon-only content. I mean,
you could be a Patreon-only content, babe.
This podcast could like really turn into a different kind of podcast so quickly.
Yeah, I mean, let's go.
Let's do it. We're off to a great start.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear just how you're doing, how your week's been, highs and lows if you're having trouble thinking of something.
I had a GI appointment and I didn't get triggered the whole time today.
Nice.
So that's exciting.
That's really exciting, genuinely. I mean, GI stuff definitely, but also just medical, doctor stuff. I can feel very easily triggered. Can I ask what sorts of things trigger you? Or is that triggering to talk about?
No, that's okay. So in general, medical stuff can be super triggering for me just because I've been in and out of the healthcare system as a patient pretty much my entire life. My mom was definitely a really good advocate for me growing up, and she definitely shielded me from a lot of the crap. And whenever there was a provider that wasn't like really good, we just didn't go back to them, and she handled it all. So like becoming an adult and trying to find my own specialists up here because I'm not living in the same state that I grew up in. So like trying to find specialists that are good and don't suck. And I mean this in two different ways, that are good at their jobs, because that's not necessarily guaranteed. And also that don't like gaslight me. This particular GI, I saw someone else at this office the first time I went, and it was so bad. I was sobbing throughout most of the appointment. It took me 6 months to call the office manager to report the woman for how she treated me and the things that she had said to me. I basically like cried for most of it, then drove to my best friend's house and like cried on her side for a while. It was just like so bad. That's one of like the worst ones that happened. Anybody dealing with chronic health issues, I feel like we kind of gaslight ourselves all the time of like, it's not really bad. And then to then additionally get that when we finally take ourselves seriously enough to go to the doctor, and then we get like yelled at and admonished and further gaslighting. It's like, why did I get out of bed today? Like what was the point of any of that?
Totally.
so I made it very clear that I'm never going to see that provider again. And I have a different person now. But it's exhausting, like when you don't feel good, to advocate for yourself. There's just so many layers of like mental health, environmental stuff, all of it. It's never simple.
Yeah, I'm sorry that happened, and that it sounds like there have been like multiple occasions where there's gaslighting and all of that. I definitely have felt that. And like, this is due to privilege, but have been avoiding seeing doctors lately because I'm just like, I don't want to. Because
it's exhausting, and it feels like it creates so much more issues sometimes than solving anything. Not to put words in your mouth, but
no, totally. And I definitely, like, growing up more so had chronic stuff, and oh my gosh, I have like a major cramp, like a cramp in my foot, like a Charlie horse. Why is this happening?
stand up.
I've been sedentary today. Maybe that's why.
I find if you stand up on a Charlie horse, it goes away.
Really? I just like tried to stretch
Yeah.
it out. I think it's past. Yeah, I really feel that though. Also, that's a good point about childhood. Like my mom was such a good advocate. She was the one that was like, we need a second opinion. Like this is not acceptable behavior or treatment. And so I went in as an adult thinking I'd be like heard and supported, and they would be advocating for me, which is what you feel like you need when you're not feeling good, especially. And instead to have to feel like you need to like prove somehow that.
Yeah. Being a woman with chronic illness is just like, and I have the privilege of being a white woman. So like, I can't even imagine how much more challenging it is for women of color and like non-binary people of color that are trying to get the healthcare that they need and just not heard at all. It's a shame. And now being a mom myself, in terms of advocating, it's so much easier to do all that stuff for her than it is for myself, which I feel like is true for so many people in a lot of ways. It's like, I can schedule your doctor's appointment, but I would rather jump in front of a train than like call my doctor's office to schedule an appointment.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, didn't get triggered by the doctor today.
Honestly, that's such a win. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Sorry, my cat's very interested in this.
You said Nadine.
Yeah, Nadine.
Welcome to you and Nadine to the podcast.
Thank you.
This will be a joint interview.
For having me and us. I'm sure she'll make an appearance.
I hope so. But yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, we have been talking about doing this interview for over 6 months. Right?
Yeah. Something like that.
I'm so excited to have this conversation, though. We should tell people how we know each other. Do you have any first impressions? I'm asking everybody this.
I don't really remember like a strong first impression. I just remember that we lived next to each other in the basement of Farron. And one day you gave me a lot of flowers because you didn't want them anymore. Like baking flowers, cooking flowers. And I was like, oh, these are like expensive. So I was like, yes, I will take them. And that was like pretty much the extent of our interaction in college.
Yep, that was. I actually kind of forgot. About that. Did I already tell you like the background behind that? Like why I was getting rid of them?
I don't remember. I'm sure you did, but I don't remember.
I probably didn't at the time, but I was like in the thick of my disordered eating and was like baking shit and like binge eating it and was like, I can't be trusted. I need to just like, I was doing one of those like sweeping cleanses of like anything with sugar or anything, whatever. So I'm really glad they went to a home where hopefully there was like a bit of a healthier relationship
with food. There was some use.
I remember they were weird things too. It was like pea flour or something.
Yeah, I remember specifically the pea flour. And I was like, what in God's green earth like do you make with pea flour that I would actually want to eat? Because I'm like kind of a picky eater. And so I'm like, that one definitely expired and got thrown away without being used.
Yeah. I've never bought pea flour since. I feel like pea protein is very in right now, but I haven't bought that either. It's like in vegetarian stuff, I think. But anyway, that is the true first impression, which I low-key forgot about temporarily. So that's the first impression, is college. Fast forward, you and I both start to work at the only mega church in New England. Is that accurate?
I don't think so. I think it's the biggest church in New England,
Okay.
technically. Technically. I don't even know what metrics they would be going by anymore.
Yeah.
But it's definitely the biggest one in Massachusetts.
Okay. Got it. Was that your first job out of college too? Yeah, we graduated at the same
Yeah, it
time.
was. Yeah, I
Yeah.
interviewed in the spring and then started a week after graduation, or no, not even like 3 days after graduation. I should have taken a week off, but your girl didn't have good boundaries then. So we
I didn't
do
even
now.
know. Yeah, I didn't even know what boundaries were at the time, honestly. Like, I tell
Yeah.
this story all the time, but my first therapy session, my therapist was like, "So, what about boundaries?" And I was like, "Come again?" Like, I don't know what you mean. Can you repeat the
Like we
question?
need to define our terms here.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, I started as an intern and then went full time. And thinking about my first impression of you, I was reflecting on it earlier. You were always very cool to me. Like, you were,
What?
yeah, you were like a cool kid in my mind.
Oh my
Like,
gosh.
I was, okay, I was a little bit scared of you. Like, I was intimidated because you were
I've
cool.
gotten that before. I haven't gotten that I was a cool person, but I have been told I'm intimidating.
Okay, it was like I was intimidated because you were cool to me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Um, whoa. um, so yeah, I remember being like a little nervous to talk to you, and I do feel like we got way closer after we left the church. But another thing
Hmm.
I remember about you that really taught me something is, and obviously you do this now too, but if I ask you how you're doing and if I asked you how you were doing, I think you were honest. If you
Hmm.
weren't having the best day, you would say that.
Yeah.
And at the time, that shit made such a difference for me, who
Mm.
I'm sure nobody directly told me to do this, but like if somebody asked me how I was doing, it was like 100% slap a smile on my face, thumbs up, I'm fine. Even if I'm like, like
Yeah.
tearing up through it.
I think I remember some conversations of being like, "How are you?" And then I follow up with, "But like, how are you really?" Because it's so much used as a salutation rather than an actual question.
Totally. And I could be just misremembering, but I feel like you and also Jocelyn, she was like
Mm.
helpful in a different way because one time she said, "How are you?" And I said, "Busy." And I guess that was another like go to answer for me. And she was
Mm.
like, "You should probably stop doing that." Like, stop doing so much. And I was like,
I love
"What?"
it.
Um,
Yeah.
like, I can do that. Anyway, I'm rambling on about me.
No, you're
Back to
good. You're
you.
good. Yeah, I'm trying to remember, like, because I had the context of Gordon, it was, and we were just like straight out of school. Honestly, it's so long ago, I don't even remember. I just remember like seeing you across the room during staff chapel,
Mm-hmm.
and then kind of we had our little group of youngins, and
Youngins.
I needed to like get up because I can't sit still to save my life. So I'd come visit everyone all the time. So I'd come visit you downstairs. Yeah, and then like hanging out a little bit. You were kind of like my gluten-free ally.
Yes.
Yeah, and you were always like, so people probably don't know this about me if you're watching or listening, but I found out that I was pregnant pretty shortly after college. Like mid-August, found out that I was pregnant and decided to keep the baby. And doing that while working at a church was extremely complicated and traumatizing. But I definitely remember that you were one of the people that it was like not an issue. You were always super supportive, and I didn't feel judged by you, which was a very pervasive thing. And I have pictures of like Genevieve in your arms with her little like fuzzy hair and
Yes. Yeah, I'm glad you didn't feel judged. I also, um, so this is where I guess we get into our maybe like parallel journeys or deconstruction if we want to go there. But I
yeah.
do have some like I guess regrets. Like I have a lot of regrets. If I think back on so I grew up like very Christian, very like black and white binary in my mind. And
Mm-hmm.
when we worked there, that was me at the tail end of my like very Christian kind of fundamentalist days.
Mm-hmm.
No hate to anyone. This is my disclaimer. No hate to anybody who finds that kind of religion or faith helpful. The way that I interpreted and lived out my faith was harmful in a lot of ways to me and other people, I think. Just like owning what's mine. And one of my like regrets, so to speak, is while I didn't judge you, like now looking back, I'm like, I should have been way more like, seriously, how are you? And like, what is your experience? And like, how can I actually support you? And more like openly and obviously be supportive
But
of
I also
you.
I don't blame you at all though, because the culture of it was such that to overtly show support was to show that you're okay with it
Mm-hmm.
and with all of it. And it was very made very clear to me very explicitly that if I was in a different position at the church that I would have been fired for it. And
Wow.
I, yep. And it got to the point where I was having meetings with executive and senior leadership, and like I wouldn't be comfortable by myself in those meetings. And I wanted a third party in the room. And and I really didn't know who the right person to have in the room with me was looking back. Like there were definitely people that should have been advocates for me and were not. They were complicit in abuses that happened there. And I remember a conversation with someone in leadership there where I remember like stopping the conversation and saying, "It feels like you're shaming my baby for existing."
Mm.
And she's done nothing wrong. So like we need to back up here.
Mm-hmm.
Because they were trying to hold me accountable and go through this whole accountability process for having sex before being married and all of that bullshit.
Wow.
And even the way that it was announced, there was an interesting parallel because mine went out as an email co-written of me with the senior pastor, and it was about like my remorse but choosing to keep her, and it was like looking back it's really gross, like it's nasty. And like a week later one of the pastors announces that his wife's pregnant, and for him it was this whole joyous thing, it was celebrated. And yet mine is this like dirty little secret, and all of my public work at the church was taken away from me
Wow.
without being told, like without telling the congregation anything. So I was interfacing with hundreds of people with the work that I was doing, and all of a sudden I disappeared with no
Wow.
no explanation. So all that to say, like everything about that situation and the environment was to be shameful and oppressive. Like
Mm-hmm.
none of it was actually about tangibly supporting me. I think people in one-on-one conversations behind closed doors had more supportive conversations. And I do have to say, the women held a baby shower for me, and I got so much stuff that helped me because like I made no money. I was basically right above poverty line, which is disgusting working at a multi-million-dollar church that their staff members have to be helped by the benevolence fund, but that's another story for another day. So like I am really grateful for the ways that I was like tangibly helped in those ways. The way that everything was handled was such a shadow over what should have been a very joyful time in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
all that to say, I don't blame you because like like all of it was really oppressive.
Yeah. And I think Well, first of all, thank you for sharing all of that. I'm so sorry that that happened, and I appreciate that you're being like generous to me. But I also am sorry that I wasn't like
Mm.
a more active participant in like the support of you and your child and like celebration of that, because you're right, that
See,
should have
and that's
been.
so funny because I remember like us taking walks over to like the
Well,
main building and that kind of thing, and that's like what I needed. I just needed like
yeah.
normalcy and friendship.
Well, I'm glad. I really do. Um, I regret it. Like, I'm sorry. And I legit, what I offered you is all
Mm.
I could offer at the time. Like, you
Mm.
sharing all of this, I am like, wow, it really worked on me. Like, I was so naive. I was so like, do, like, cool, Emily's having a
Mm.
baby. Like, it was like,
Mm.
would not have ever known to suspect or ask that anything was happening because I was
Yeah.
so in that world and still so like indoctrinated.
And I think indoctrinated is a really good way to phrase that because that's what it is, especially because both of us, we were raised in this for our entire lives. And then we went to college at a super evangelical place. And then our first job out of college was a very evangelical institution. Like it's hard to think critically when you're in the bubble all the
Mm-hmm.
time until you
Yeah.
start like getting out of that and you're like, oh wait, why don't I like fit in this anymore out? Like why now I'm getting squished because I don't fit in the bubble. And it's like,
That's exactly how it
kind of what?
feels. It's incredibly disorienting and like scary and full of grief when you actually do let yourself
For
expand or break
sure.
out of molds. But also for anybody that is like contemplating, like on the edge, because that is where I was at that time of
Mm.
like, do I just dig my heels in or do I actually allow myself to think critically? It is so worth it. You might not know who you are or what you're doing for like a time, a period of weeks, months, years. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's so much better when you get to
Yeah.
like the other side. Not that it's quite as linear as that, but
I definitely agree like with the term disorienting. It is incredibly disorienting because so much of the language, especially in religious institutions, is about like anchoring and foundation and like family and community. And when you step away from that, even just like temporarily, like for me, really my journey out of the church was after Genevieve was born, like way later. I gave myself 6 months of we're not going to entertain the thought of going to church because every Sunday I was just riddled with guilt if I didn't get up in time and didn't go. And then I was just miserable the whole time. But I was exhausted because I was a single mom of an infant dealing with like custody stuff, working full time, all that. So I gave myself 6 months to just not go. And even that was it was so freeing and that was like the baby step that I needed. But then the subsequent years is a total grieving process.
mm-hmm.
Like, and I feel like there's still a lot of things about that church community, the big C church community
Yeah.
that I miss. Like having communal singing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't have an outlet for singing really anymore, and that kind of like feeling it's so like visceral. And intergenerational relationships and having people that I'm not related to be invested in my life, even though usually that was expressed like way too much.
Mm-hmm.
But like really the only people that I interact with that are generations above me are in positions of power over me at work
Yeah. Ooh, that's a good point.
rather than quasi peers or more like familial figures in a
Yeah.
church community. And I miss that, but at the same time, I feel like I know myself so much more. Like I had to strip away all those things and it was definitely an identity crisis for a bit of like who am I? Like life has been this. And for me like my bachelor's degree is in biblical studies. I did part of a master's degree in theology. Like I have thousands of dollars in student loans towards something that like I can't ascribe to And it's like, cool. So it's very much like, do I dig my heels in because I've invested my entire life and all of my assets to this thing? Or do I like stop hating myself and like learn how to like exist as myself?
Damn. Oh shit. That's so good. Thank you for sharing all of that. I'm tempted to just
Yeah.
keep going. Like this is what we do. Like I could just go on. But
Yeah.
you mentioned like an identity crisis. So speaking as you now, as you know, the
Mhm.
podcast is called Who Are You and What Are You Doing Here? So really, like, who are you and what are you doing here? What comes to mind when I throw those
Yeah.
questions at you?
So who am I? I think of the different roles, primarily being a mom. That's like my number one prime, like my prime directive. Being an artist in whatever ways, being a friend, a lover. It's interesting. Like, I definitely feel like a lot of my roles are very relational. Like, the way that I think of myself and relate to the world is in relation to other people.
That feels like very deeply human.
Mm.
And then what are you doing here? Is that kind of like lumped into
Oh God.
the who are you and the roles?
What am I? I don't know what I'm doing here. Like on the planet or like in my house.
Yeah, you're not the first person that's asked that. There's no right or wrong answer. I'm genuinely curious, like what just comes to mind.
Existing.
Mm-hmm.
My personal philosophy, to keep it very cerebral here because that's can't help ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I like to leave every situation better than how I found it. Just trying to be an authentically positive impact on the people and the places that I interact with. And that can look and take various shapes and forms, but I would say that that's my general guiding philosophy.
That's so good. Why do you do that?
I'm kind of a fixer. I like to fix things, but I don't like fake band-aids. I tend to be more of the confrontational person that's like, okay, like let's get down to what's actually going on here. And really, I like to treat the root source and not the symptoms of things. And I can definitely see that with like a lot of my parenting is like, okay, like you're having a tantrum, but like, why are you having a tantrum? Not just like, okay, let's make the tantrum stop because this is overstimulating for all of us and we all hate it. But it's like, okay, this is like you're trying to communicate something right now, even if you can't necessarily articulate it yet. So, like, let's tease out what's going on so that we can get to that and then
Mm-hmm.
take a step back and address that.
Yeah, that's so powerful. I've watched you do that many times, not in the form of like watching tantrums necessarily or like really escalated situations, but just with watching you be a mother has been like healing for me, honestly. Like in my
Mm.
own like inner child nurturing, learning to reparent myself, but just knowing that your child is like growing up in an environment where feelings are welcome, feelings aren't like your feelings, they're not too big, and just the overall framework, like the foundation that you're building with her by teaching her love and acceptance in ways that many places and people don't. Like that's the shit that changes the world. So,
I hope
thank you.
so.
On behalf of
The world.
society everywhere, yeah. On behalf of our future on
Yeah.
this planet, thank you.
It's exhausting though. I have to say it was easier when she was like not in school yet, and now that she's in school and dealing with all of the drama, the amount of shit that happened in elementary school. I'm like, these kids are so mean. Like, what is going on here? And I'm like, and then Genevieve is so articulate about all of it, which is great, which is really good.
You
But it's
taught
also like
her.
this is the double-edged sword of like teaching emotional literacy and fostering that from such an early age. It's like, okay, so we're gonna feel like every feeling. Okay. Okay, cool. But
Cool,
I
cool,
feel
no
like I'm really playing the
problem.
long game here of like maybe she'll need less therapy than I need.
Yeah.
And hopefully like she'll like me when she's an adult.
Yes. And also, I imagine, like, speaking of long game, she'll need less, like, you're in it with her in
Mm,
most of the things as you,
yeah.
like, which feels appropriate as her mother. But longer term, like, that's how you learn as an adult to be able to do all of that processing on your own. And that's
Yeah.
what so many adults are
Yeah.
just now, myself at least, like, I'm just now like, what is a feeling? How do I not
Right?
lose my shit when it comes
Or
up?
like let's not dissociate. And it's like, but why not?
Oh
Why
yeah, that's
not? When
huge.
we could just like dissociate and function totally fine and it's great until you stub your
Yes.
toe one day. Like,
And then yeah, your world implodes.
yeah.
Can switch real quick. Okay, speaking of motherhood, it doesn't have to be the biggest, but what is like one significant lesson that you've learned or are learning, or one thing that was like really surprising? Just general reflections
Mm.
on motherhood.
Oh God. There's so much. I mean that's a lesson. There's so much.
Mm-hmm.
I think something that I had to learn and I'm still actively learning, but being a single mom of like I can't be everything and everyone for her. And I think in context of like traditional family structures of two parents or a mom and a dad, I still think that there's way too much pressure that parents put on themselves to be everything for their kids. The nuclear family is a fairly modern idea and it's not good. It's
Mm-hmm.
super isolating and it's really harmful to parents and kids. So since the beginning, I've tried to have other adults in Genevieve's life because I know there's going to be a time where there's things that happen that she doesn't want to talk to me about. Like I get it. We all have those stuff that it's like I don't want to talk to my mom. Like
Mm-hmm.
that'd be weird. Like, but I want her to have those safe people that she can talk to about that stuff and that she can call at 2 a.m. at a sleepover and she's just like, oh God, like I hate this and like please help me. I want her to have safe people beyond myself because I know I can't be everywhere all at once and I can't be everyone to her. But I still try, even though I'm saying this. Like I can verbalize it, but then embodying it on a day to day is like such a different story.
Yeah, I mean that's what takes time. It's easy enough to say like the right thing or the thing you logically believe,
Oh
but
God, yeah.
putting it into practice is it's the practice. It takes time, and I imagine it's
Yeah.
so hard. It feels so instinctual even without kids. This is just my own codependency stuff, I guess, but like it's so instinctual for me to just want to be everything to somebody or like save them or
Mm-hmm.
fix, as you said, like you're a fixer. Like when it's your own child, I can only imagine how hard it is to remind yourself of that and actually put it into practice of like prioritizing those other relationships. That's a very like selfless and self-aware thing to do because I think a lot of parents would like to.
We all want to be we want to be the superhero for our kid. We
Yeah.
want to be the ultimate nurturer. We want to be the person that saves the day. We want to be the perfect parent that does not exist with the perfectly clean house and like the organized like kids IKEA stuff. Like, but it's not going to happen. Like
Mhm.
it's not. But I feel like every parent has the shame of like, but I'm not doing it. Like 40 lashes minus one. I can't be everything for my child. Uh, it's been like really helpful though. So I've my wonderful partner, he has been like kind of like forcing help onto me and not in like a bad way, in a really helpful way of like, no, like I am here. I
Mhm.
would like to do the thing. Can you let me do the thing? And I'm like, still, I could still feel myself like sitting on the couch being like, he's doing the thing. Is it okay that he's doing the thing? Like, I hope he doesn't hate me for doing the thing, even though he offered to do the thing. But it's probably
Mhm.
good for him to do the thing because then I'm not doing all the things. But so it's something that I'm like actively working on and very self-aware about of just like releasing the control. It's all about control. And so much of my early years of parenting was I was so hyper vigilant for so many reasons that even letting like someone else do a phone call for me on behalf of Genevieve is like, no, but like I need to know everything. I need to know everything that's being said. And it's like, no, just a phone call. You can like calm it down a little bit, Wilson.
Yeah, Wilson. Talking to yourself like you're your own coach.
Oh yeah. Like, come on, Wilson.
Yeah. That's really well said. I admire your self-awareness, and I think that's so relatable too. So relatable. And I'm not even a mother.
But we all like to take care of things. And I feel like
Yes.
the idea of always trying to meet these images that are fake and attain these metrics that are fake.
Yeah, that are impossible.
Yeah. I feel like anyone can relate to that. I think it's particularly potent in parenthood and motherhood because it's like, this is my biggest responsibility. Like, better not fuck up this kid if like, oh no, like didn't vacuum 3 times this week, so they're not going to college. Like, we just spiral. But I think the principles amongst it all, I think, are universal.
Yeah. Okay, I need to be aware of the time because I could talk to you for like 3 hours because that's what we usually do. I'd love to ask you a couple more questions.
Yeah, and I think it'd be also cool to like about our post-church relationship because neither of us have worked in the church now for several years. You live in a different state now.
I do, indeed.
Like, we've both had huge life changes, and yet like through it all, I feel like we've gotten closer over the years, even though we see each other less and talk less.
I completely agree.
Yeah, and just having like such parallel experiences like on so many different levels. But it's so interesting because like I've stayed in the same place. I live in the same county. Like I'm a mom, and you're just like a nomadic free soul. And yet like we still have so much that with each other that resonates, and I think that's super cool and special that on paper like it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I mean, it also does though. I think I have not been really nomadic in the way that I was, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I have really become a homebody, but here in Chicago. But I get what you're saying. Like overall, yes. Like even just the fact that we don't live remotely close to each other. I am so grateful for it. This has been like a huge lesson in my like adulthood, is just the importance of, we might have been texting about this. I think we were, like the importance of friendship, chosen family. And it's not something that usually happens naturally. And we've definitely put work into our relationship. That's like, that's for sure. But it does feel like an element of luck that we met when we did, and did put in the work or like initiate staying in touch afterwards. Because we very easily could have not done that. I don't have a lot of people like this, but yeah, I don't really know what I want to say. I guess it's just like, it's weird. It's like eerie almost that our paths have been so aligned. And I feel like when we first met, I guess I don't know how aligned we were, but I almost imagine like I have had relationships at that church that were like, I don't know if we were aligned or not beforehand, but we came to the church and were fully aligned. Like it felt like what our relationship feels like now in its own way. And then we stopped working at the church and it was just opposite directions. Like I'm not saying we couldn't be friends, but like it makes total sense why we've disconnected. And it's really sad at the same time because those relationships were really meaningful at the time. And with us, it feels like, again, I don't know how aligned or not we were, like when we were at the church or even beforehand, but like afterwards, like what are the odds that we've completely synced up, obviously in our own unique ways. But yeah, I'm just so grateful for it. And it's like hard to believe sometimes. But you feel like one of those people where like it can be months, years even, although I'm glad we don't let it get to that point.
Yeah.
Where like we could just, it sounds so cliche, but like pick right up where we left off and also just like deeply understand each other. I mean, barring something really weird happening in the future where like one of us takes a really sharp left turn. But
I mean, I don't see that happening.
Yeah.
We're way too open with each other, or like unless one of us joins a cult that like bans
which
us
I'm always
from...
scared I'm gonna do. Don't let me do
it's
that.
hard, honestly. Like growing up in such a in the framework that we did, we were groomed to be in a cult. I'm just gonna leave it at that.
No, I think that's really well said.
I feel like whenever we've like reconnected and talked, it's like, oh, like you had the same realization too recently. And it's like, oh, cool. We can actually like, there's someone to talk to about this. And I definitely think it's really cool that, like we do have similar origin stories per se. And whenever we have connected up, it's like, okay, I'm not crazy for asking these questions, trying out these different paths. Like it's validating when all of the voices of the origin is telling you that everything you're even thinking about is of the devil.
Yes, I agree. If anything, and I don't identify as religious now, but it like gives me, I do consider myself to be like a spiritual person. I don't know about you, but it kind of renews my faith in spirituality or like the version of God or the universe that I believe in now. Like there is still good. There's still good here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have like other stuff you want to talk about related to this? I just don't want to like move beyond this topic if there's like more here, you know?
Yeah. I need to at some point go back and watch that documentary that you were in, because I feel like that would be helpful with, weren't you in like a movie thing? Which one? Oh my God. So like healing stuff.
That sounded so funny. I had like a cameo. What's that cameo appearance? Is that the term I'm looking for? In like a Rob Bell documentary. You saw like the back of my head, but I'm guessing that's not what you were talking about.
No, wasn't there like a thing that you were interviewed?
That was related to like holistic healing and gluten-free stuff.
There's like connections there of having to go outside of the norm in order to find healing. I feel like is a lot of what I've like seen of you. Like medically, spiritually, like having to go outside of the normal scripts. And like you said, like you had a lot of chronic issues before, and now look at you now. You're so strong.
May or may not be coming back. I feel like I'm now, since I'm getting older, I have like other chronic issues. I'm like hesitant to call them chronic, but now I'm having like weird pain. Whatever, you don't need to know. The world doesn't need to know. But yes, I mean the podcast world. I'll tell you everything and anything, and you know that. No, I know. Whether you need to know or not. But yeah, that's, I guess like a question is coming to me kind of related to that. So you were talking earlier about when you left the church, or even now, kind of missing the community aspect, relationships, the like group singing or worship, which are also things that I like really loved about being in that kind of environment. What is like, not that it's as simple as like replacing X with Y, but what's bringing you joy today, and what's like making you feel joyful and connected today?
That's a good question. So I think for me, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but relationships are just really such a driving force for me. I feel like I've always been fairly intentional of reaching out to people, making sure that something is like put on the calendar and trying to keep up with people. And that's something that always fills my bucket. Like catching up with people like this. Life is just so weird. Like I just never thought that I would be where I am today. Like there was no way I could have predicted this. Being like my kids, and I have a kid, first of all. Didn't know if I was ever gonna even like have kids. Here we are. I have a kid who can like read and write.
And express feelings. It's incredible.
Oh my God, yeah, she can. And like so much of my life is about that. Like I always thought I was gonna be like a career woman.
Mm.
and that was going to be my driving force. Maybe it was just like the lie of capitalism that was driving those dreams as a youngin. But even like when I graduated college, my plan was to work for a few years and then go to grad school and then hopefully eventually try to get my PhD. And that's just not at all what's happening. But I'm also super okay with where I am. I think my priorities and my timelines on stuff has just shifted a lot. Like I didn't necessarily expect to be in Massachusetts still. Like I was planning on moving out to like Canada, like British Columbia for grad school. I was like, and then maybe like I'll go to England for my PhD. Like I had all these plans, right? But I'm like here building a home, building a community, building a family, and I love it. I forget what your
Mm.
question was. Um,
Just you're answering it. Like, what brings you joy and connection? And then I also asked you when you said, like, this isn't what I pictured or like where I thought I'd be.
yeah,
I was curious to hear more.
like finding contentment in such small, innocuous things. I think younger Emily was always chasing these like big ideas of like happiness and like I don't think I even really knew what happiness really was. I think part of it is because like I didn't really know myself and I wasn't being honest with myself like ever. Um, like you have to be able to face yourself, all the bads and all the goods, in order to really experience like true contentment. And for me, like I get so much of that just like in quiet moments with like Genevieve wrote me a sticky note the other day that was basically like, I love you because you're the best person to be my mom. And I'm like, ugh! Like,
Forget it. Oh my
I'm
gosh.
dead. I'm dead. And then
Oh.
like he just remembers like every little thing ever that I've mentioned about myself and things that I love, and he'll just like tune into that. And it's just like to be seen so well and to be like loved so well, like that for me is like I never thought that I would really be just like I just like love my family and love
Mm-hmm.
being like I always for me that was such a secondary or tertiary priority of like yeah maybe I'll have kids, like maybe I'll get married, like I don't know, like because so much of our like my purpose or what I felt like was my purpose was tied in with like career, and it's just not. And I just get so happy when like the three of us are just like snuggling on the couch and we're like all playing video games, and it's like nothing can make this better. Like this is just the best. So like those are the things that really just like fill my heart.
It's so sweet and so profound. Like, it's so silly how simple the true pleasures of life are. It is all about connection.
Yeah. And I think for myself too that I had to like fight to get back to the simple.
Yeah.
Like I've gone through a lot with mental health over the last few years and physical health, and like there was a long time where I was like not okay and I needed to like work to be okay. And I don't think that I'm the kind of person that I feel like I have to like learn the hard way, I guess. But I feel like I can appreciate and really like experience this to a degree that I don't think I would have had I not experienced like the opposite side.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that made any sense.
It did. Beautifully said. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. Can I ask you one more question just about, can we
Yeah.
just touch on art really quick?
Yeah.
You have been creating the most beautiful pieces. I think mainly, is it like stitching? What do you call it?
Yeah, so embroidery.
Embroidery. Duh. And then embroidery, watercolors. Tell
Hmm.
me about how you started doing this. Have you always been like an artist? And what
Hmm.
inspired you to do it? How do you create space for it now? That was like 10 questions in one, but just tell me about your
I've
art.
Yeah, I've always been very art inclined. I was in like every art show growing up. I'm just gonna toot my
Wow.
own horn for a second.
Yeah.
Like, um,
Round of applause.
I was actually an art major first in college before I transferred to
Oh,
Gordon. Um, like graphic design concentration. I've always been very like artsy minded, but I feel like I've been more on like the crafty side and like digital art than fine art. That always felt very intimidating to me. And I felt like I never really knew like who I was as like an artist. And I wouldn't have necessarily have called myself an artist. Probably I feel like I've only really embraced that as a role in the last year of like, yeah, I'm an artist, even though I've
mm-hmm.
been doing art my entire life. I started really getting into embroidery. I busted my ankle a couple of years ago and couldn't do anything. So I started sewing, and also I was super poor and couldn't buy food. So I started doing commissions so that I could have food. And very like slowly over the last few years, I've been doing more and more of that. And then this year, and during lockdown, I started doing some watercolors, but it was very graphical. It wasn't necessarily like these landscapes, just to try to explore the medium. And over, yeah, the last like year and a half, started getting into painting a little bit more. It always really intimidated me because my sister is like an amazing fine artist. She could do like what felt like photorealism as like a high schooler with like charcoal and oil paint. And I'm just like, well, I can't do that. So
Might as well not
guess,
do anything.
guess not. Yeah. I was like, well, guess that's Debbie's thing. So I guess it can't be an Emily thing. I don't know why we do this to ourselves. We're
Oh,
all
I
so
know, for real.
self-sabotaging.
Hmm.
It's so ridiculous. And now it's like Debbie's like, you're doing that thing. Now I'm going to do the thing. It's like kind of inspiring each other.
Hmm.
Um, but I've really been trying to ramp it up. And this past year, I knew that in 2023, I wanted to like make it an official business. The goal is like in a few years for that to like be my career and for that to be my job. So
Mm.
trying to tangibly think of like what are the steps to get there. So this year it's like, okay, it has its own bank account now. And
Nice.
like I'm applying to a booth at an arts festival and like I'm talking to some local businesses about doing pop-ups. Like trying to build more stock up, put stuff on the Etsy shop, trying to balance like how do I want to constantly be creating because I can't sit still anyway. Part of this is like if I am watching TV, like I'm on my phone or I'm like knitting something or doing something. So that it's like a productive way for me to like kind of
Hmm.
channel that energy. But also in a sustainable way because as every artist or every person I feel like has experienced, like there's burnout and there's times where you're not going to want to create something and if you're not feeling it you can tell in the piece like it's going to be shitty. So what are ways that I can kind of like scale up without killing myself,
Hmm.
which is part of like totally, but it is part of what has been some of the motivation with the watercolors, like okay, I can get prints of these and I can sell prints. Whereas with the embroidery is like every piece is a custom piece. And I'm putting minimum 10 hours into every piece that I do.
Wow.
Like some of them it's upwards of like 50, 60 hours of work
Wow.
into these. And that's just no one I'm like I'm not getting there's no way I would get compensated for an hourly rate for that. There's no way. So trying to think about ways to kind of compensate for
Hmm.
that. I wish I didn't have to think about that though. Like
I
I
know.
just want to live in a cottage by the ocean and just like wear fingerless gloves and paint and have a seagull that visits me every day and do what I want to do.
Yes.
Have my audiobooks playing.
I mean, is that too much to ask, really? Can we just
Right?
make that happen?
Like, come on, guys. Who's gonna give me your lakeside or oceanside cottage?
Yeah, right.
I'm your
Please gift it
girl.
to me. Yeah.
I'd put it to good use.
Yes. Okay, we have to do another episode about like capitalism if you're up for it.
Totally. Yeah.
I also, yeah, just reflecting on what you said, I've seen you like progressively start to share more, do more, get your Etsy up and running. And I've just been so impressed and so like, just yes. Like seeing it, I'm like, Emily's doing it. And that's like good for fucking you. Like, this is exactly right. I feel like I sound really weird right now, but like I
No,
feel
this
like
is
passion
so
behind it.
validating.
Like even though I didn't even know it was happening, but like once I realized, I'm like, this is perfect. You're so good at what you do, and there's so much heart behind it. Like you made a hat that I bought, and it's like the most special thing to me. And I just think there's something so precious and like meaningful about art. And I love that you're thinking about it as much as I wish capitalism wasn't a thing and we could all just like get along and share each other's cottages and stuff. Like, I love that you are. Like, I genuinely want that for you and me. I like that I can appreciate that you're like, okay, in reality, like, how do I actually get from point A to point B if that's where I want to go, knowing that the reality is structured the way that it is.
Yeah.
This is why I want to have you back on, because like I feel like we could dive into that. But
yeah,
I support you 100%. I can't wait to buy more of your things and like see
thank you.
your business continue to grow and your art continue to grow. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm stopping myself from asking more questions, except for where can people find you? Where can people find you? How can they support you? Where can they find your art?
That's a really good question. I'm really bad at self-promotion because I don't ever remember what my things are.
I'll link it all.
Yeah. Check out the links.
Link down below.
My Etsy is eRoseShopCo. My Instagram is erose.shop. I forget what my Twitter is, but I don't go on Twitter. It's too depressing.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Check out the gram and the Etsy if you want to give me money / support me.
Hell yeah. No. Everyone, go do it. You'll get so much in return. The art sounds so generic, is beautiful. The art, capital A.
I feel like when I go onto the pages, it's like, there's nothing on there. But there's so much brewing behind the scenes. Like, I just have so much respect for people that have been doing this for years and years and like fighting the algorithms and everything else. Because for every little thing we see that someone posts online on their shops or on their social media, there's hundreds of hours of work behind it all. So, mad respect.
Mad respect to you too. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate your journey, our friendship. Just excited to see your journey continue. I'm excited to continue to be each other's, I don't know if it's like too forward to call you chosen family, but like continue to see our little chosen family situation continue.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad we were able to do this. I'm excited for you. I love you.
I love you too. This was so lovely. Thank you so much for listening to Who Are You and What Are You Doing Here? I hope you enjoyed this, Emily. I hope you enjoyed this Emily with episode. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Emily Wilson. Let me know what you thought. Definitely connect with Emily. Order something from her Etsy shop. I've bought a couple of things from her and they're in my apartment and they just bring me so much joy. So I hope that they do for you too if you buy something. And support the podcast. Like, follow, subscribe, comment, rate, review, whatever you can think of. We do have a Patreon. I did want to plug the Patreon. So patreon.com/ I don't know what it is, patreon.com/Bibs Live. Did you get that? Patreon.com/Bibs Live. If you'd like to support the podcast and support the work that I'm doing, the conversations that we're having here, would so deeply appreciate your support through Patreon. I also do have a newsletter where I share written content, things that have been on my mind, about once a month. I'll link to that as well for how you can sign up. I hope I'm not forgetting anything, but thank you so much for listening. Let me know what you thought, and we'll see you back here next month. Take care.